Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Leadership Network's May Lunch and Learn or Cinco de Mayo Lunch and Learn. To get our Lunch and Learn started, we are going to show a video of Encanto, We Don't Talk About Bruno in ASL. It is Language Access Month and National Deaf History Month, and we thought this video would closely align with those celebrations along with our topic today. Because Encanto's abuela character, if you remember in the song Dos Oruguitas, it provides a backdrop of the family's history and the displacement of war, which mirrors today's conversation of the Battle of Puebla and the experiences still happening today by many families fleeing their home countries. Disney also released a couple of other videos. One was from Frozen and the other one was from Moana, so you may want to look those up as well. And without further ado, we will not be playing the video on the recording, so make sure that you look it up if you're watching the recording. I want to introduce you to Anita Rocha. She will be our presenter today. Anita is a DSHS Research Associate, trained and committed administrative data steward, all things data. It's also why she represents LLN on the Governor's Subcabinet on Immigration Data Subcommittee. So I love these pictures of Anita. The one on the left is of her dancing at Lula Fest with our other members and event leaders, Jose, Monica, and Michaela. And then also sitting in her beautiful huipil blouse representing LLN at our LLN table, which you will see her at Public Service Recognition Week as well this month. And so we welcome you or introduce to you Anita Rocha, who will teach you all things Cinco de Mayo today, what it is, and what it has become over the years in the U.S., and making the point that this is a U.S. holiday as well as a Mexican holiday, especially to many of us with Mexican American heritage. She originally created this presentation for the employee resource group Somos at the Department of Revenue, which she did in March, and have asked her to come share it with all of us today. So thank you, Anita. She also wants to thank Melissa Barajas for inviting LLN to come to go talk with them, and Claudia Morales, a Chicano Studies instructor at Del Mar College in Corpus Christi, who shared a lot of the content that she will be sharing with you today. Anita grew up in Southern California and identifies as Chicana or Chicanx and an American with Mexican ancestry. So welcome, Anita.
Mayo is okay. Cinco Mayo is different from the Mexican Independence Day or Día de la Independencia de Mexico, popularly celebrated. The Independence Day is popularly celebrated on September 16th and commemorates Mexico's independence from Spain, beginning in 1810 when Father Miguel Hidalgo famously called for the Mexican people to stand up against Spanish rule or misrule. So Cinco de Mayo is different from that holiday. It happens like a totally different time, like 40 to 50 years later. So Cinco de Mayo is not a national holiday in Mexico. The public schools do tend to be closed on that day, but the day is only officially celebrated in the states of Puebla and the state of Veracruz. So not a national holiday. In fact, according to the Pima Library, the largest Cinco de Mayo celebration in the world is in Los Angeles. So that's the question today. Why do Mexican Americans celebrate this holiday more so even than Mexicans do? All right, so what is it? It was a commemoration of the Battle of Puebla. So you'll see this map. I have this small map on the bottom right of Mexico. And then the central section is blown up. And this is where Puebla is. It's in the center of that blown up section. It's quite a bit interior from the Gulf. And then to its northwest is Mexico City. So if you know Mexico City, you kind of know where Puebla is by orientation. Okay, so let me give you some historical background. So this is May 5th, 1862. This commemorates Mexico's victory over the French at Puebla. So let me set it up. Uh, about 20 years prior to this battle, the U.S. and Mexico, there was a U.S.-Mexico war that began in about 1846, right? That is the war that the U.S. won over Mexico, and it led to this major loss of land, like one half of Mexico's territory, including California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, parts of Arizona, Colorado, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Wyoming. So many Mexicans were deeply discouraged by that defeat. And then in the 1860s, so fast forward 20 years more recently, in the 1860s, a French intervention was triggered when the Mexican president Benito Juarez declared a 2-year moratorium on loan interest payments to French, British, and Spanish creditors. So basically, Benito Juarez is saying Mexico's not going to pay our creditors. And so what do the European creditors do? They send troops, right? So Spain first occupied Veracruz in 1861, and then the French and British arrived in 1862. The primary invasion force was French, and they were there supposedly to coerce this payment, right? But according to Antonio Sanchez, a historian, the real motivation was Napoleon III's intent to restore the French monarchy and to expand the French Empire. So it was colonialism. So now at Puebla, the Mexicans were led by General Ignacio Zaragoza, a native Tejano, and he was born in what is now Texas. So the Mexico army held out. The French troops failed to storm the forts of Loreto and Guadalupe, and the Mexican victory at Puebla against this better equipped French force provided this patriotic inspiration to Mexicans, right? It was a win in a string of losses. So unfortunately, it was short-lived, right? Later, this larger French force defeated the Mexican army at the Second Battle of Puebla and then went on to occupy Mexico City. So the French came in with a larger force. All right, so that's Cinco de Mayo. It's a battle at Puebla. Okay, so what's the inspiration for the Cinco de Mayo celebration? So at the time, President Benito Juarez declared Cinco de Mayo a national holiday after this French battle, this French defeat at the Battle of Puebla. So, and then just a couple years later in 1864, according to historian Hayes Bautista, Antonio Mancias, the editor of San Francisco's La Voz de Mexico, pointed out the historical significance of Cinco de Mayo in an article. And that same year, a gold mining town of Sonora in Tulum County, California, had one of the earliest Cinco de Mayo celebrations. Okay, so this led to patriotic assemblies. So keep in mind, again, what's happening historically in the 1860s, there are simultaneous conflicts tearing apart both Mexico and the U.S. This is in the 1860s, it's the U.S. Civil War, and in Mexico, it's the Second French Intervention, right? Mexicans saw a common cause, right? Herminia Esqueda, our wonderful LLN chair, reminding me that Mexico had abolished slavery in 1829, so some 40 years earlier, and with the Guerrero Decree. And people in the U.S. who were trying to escape enslavement during this interim could gain their freedom either going to the northern states, northern states as we know about, but also you could go south to Mexico and also gain your freedom. So Mexicans tended to side with the anti-slavery Union Army. And then in the U.S., by the late 1860s, there were at least 129 groups, according to Sanchez, who celebrated patriotic assemblies across Aztlan. So Aztlan, the name Aztlan, means the ancestral home of the Aztec people, but here in this context, it refers to the southwest region ceded to the U.S. in that war with Mexico. So it's the Southwest. Patriotic assemblies took place in California and the rest of the Southwest, even as far north as Oregon. Sanchez thinks that this possibly could have been the first Mexican-American network of a political nature. So I'm going to go into some detail about what happened at patriotic assemblies because I'm going to contrast that later about more current Cinco de Mayo celebrations. So what happened at the patriotic assemblies? In California, Latinos raised money and troops to support both Mexico's fight against Napoleon III's army and the Union's cause, right? When the Californianos learned of Zaragoza's May 5th victory, they celebrated with this renewed hope of freedom from slavery and from tyranny. So things that would happen there, like people got up and made speeches. They recited poetry. They sang the Mexican national anthem. So that was what was happening. So by the end of the Civil War in 1865, that coincides with the beginning of success for Juarez's forces against France. So there's just this parallel wars going on at the same time. All right, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so we're fast forwarding a little bit. So by the 1920s, these juntas patrióticas mexicanas had nearly disappeared. I say nearly because according to Pima Library, Cinco de Mayo has been celebrated continuously in California since 1863. And then what became more popular is the 16 de septiembre, which is the Mexican Independence Day. And according to Sanchez, that might have been the reason for the Independence Day becoming more popular in the Southwest is because of the overthrow of dictator Porfirio Diaz in the Mexican Revolution that began in 1910. The contemporary Cinco de Mayo celebrations, though, according to Tlahtecatl, date back to the Chicano movement. And we're going to talk about that. So, as you know, the civil rights movement is happening in the beginning in the late 1960s, really takes off in the 60s and the early 70s. As part of that, there was something called the Chicano movement. And there's this growing Chicano activism. Chicano civil rights activists on college campuses intentionally adopted the Battle of Puebla or the May 5th as a day to celebrate Mexican victory. Sanchez wrote, quote, Chicanos viewed their struggle in the same light as that of poor and ill-equipped Mexican army that defeated this global superpower, right? So it's at this time, predominantly celebrated in the Southwest and California. And Cinco de Mayo served as this bold declaration of political and cultural self-determination. It helped fuel this movement, right? And simultaneous to this, you may have recalled this phrase, si se puede, roughly translated into yes, we can. Si se puede is attributed to Dolores Huerta, who coined that phrase in 1972 with the United Farm Workers Campaign in Arizona, and they were there to oppose anti-union legislation. So si se puede comes from the same era. So the Chicano movement, along with the farm workers movement, won many reforms. The creation, for example, of bilingual and bicultural programs in the Southwest, improved conditions for migrant workers, the hiring of Chicano teachers, and more Mexican Americans serving as elected officials. There's lots more to do, but this was a major shift for Chicanos in the Southwest. Then comes commercialization, right? Major reform politics in the 60s and 70s gave way to these accommodationist politics, or what Tlahtecatl calls the Hispanic age, right? Corporations in the 1980s, Cinco de Mayo became corporatized and commercialized. Corporations saw a marketing opportunity, especially the alcohol and food industries. At one point, the Coors Brewing Company became the largest supporter of the Cinco de Mayo holiday. And I put Sanchez's quote in here because I think it just encapsulates the more recent Cinco de Mayo trend. So Sanchez wrote in 2013 that Cinco de Mayo has become an institutionalized, hyper-commercialized, and Americanized concoction of Mexican stereotypes and American-inspired sophomore party marketing. I love this phrase. Okay, so that's what it had become. Okay, but today, could there be a revival and renewed meaning? I found a couple of articles dating from 2023. The first one was out of the Colorado Sun. The headline was Denver groups are reclaiming Cinco de Mayo. They recognize the historical significance of the Batalla de Puebla and how it created a sense of unity and pride for Mexican and Mexican American communities. And the second article chunk came from the Dallas News, and the headline, Younger Dallas Mexican Americans embrace the tradition, right? Second and third generation Mexican Americans have begun to embrace Cinco de Mayo celebration as their own, despite it having been exploited for this marketing. So could this be a call to action? I lean towards yes. The time has come for reclaiming Cinco de Mayo, challenging stereotypes, demanding equity and redress for injustices. Could this be a beginning of another major reform movement? That's where I lean. All right. I told you lots and lots of stuff. So let's give you a few takeaways. So if you can't remember any of that, you can maybe just remember a few bullet points here. So the first one is Cinco de Mayo is part of U.S. history. It's part of U.S. history, right? While it commemorates the 1862 Battle of Puebla in Mexico, which was a triumph against all odds, it inspired Mexican Americans of Aztlan to hold patriotic assemblies that happened in the U.S. And then it was revived by the Chicano movement in their fight for civil rights in the 1960s and 70s and for working conditions, right? And then in 1980s, Cinco de Mayo did become commercialized. But more recently, people of Mexican ancestry and allies have started reclaiming the holiday with this renewed respect for cultural traditions and calls to action. So I leave you with this: Viva la raza, viva el Cinco de Mayo. Viva la raza means long live the race, which was made popular during the Chicano movement. But it carries more than just the literal meaning, right? It's a cultural rallying cry, a badge of pride, and a powerful expression of Chicano and Latino identity. So, viva la raza, viva el Cinco de Mayo. So if you want a little more information about where I got my information, here are some references and resources. They're great articles. You're welcome to read them at your leisure, and happy to send them to you. All right. Thank you, guys.
Could we all give Anita some love?
Thank you.
And you hang on, Anita, because
Okay.
we're going to open it up for questions as well. We have some more content to share, but I want to just open it up to questions because I just find all of this so fascinating. Well, Desiree mentioned in the chat, I've heard it suggested that without the Battle of Puebla, the U.S. would not have won the Civil War because they stopped the French from entering and fighting from the South. Have you heard anything similar? I have. Anita, do you want to say anything?
No, go
I don't
ahead.
want to take over.
You've heard. No, you've heard. No,
So the connection between the Battle of Puebla and the Civil War again goes back to the Treaty of Guadalupe, because let me just show you. I think I added a slide and then I hid it because I didn't want to get us off on a tangent. Here it is. So in the Treaty of Hidalgo, gosh, I should have put the year in here. I think I have it in my notes. This happened before The Battle of Puebla, right, Anita? Let me
Yeah.
look at the dates. Let me look at
Yeah,
the dates.
because it would be 40 years prior if that's the
Yes.
that's the Independence Day. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so here are some dates to keep in mind. In 1821,
Oh,
Mexico
in Mexico. Sorry, not
uh,
Independence Day. Apologies.
Mexico gains independence and allows entry to U.S. settlers. So this is Mexico. U.S. settlers come into Mexican land, which they now want to take over. And then in 1829, Mexico abolishes slavery, which Anita talked about. So this is now, there's a conflict now here. Here you've got some U.S. settlers on Mexican land who want to keep slavery, and Mexico abolishes it in 1829. Texas then wants to declare independence, which then leads to the Mexican-American War. It was from 1846 to 1848. In 1848, we have the end of the Mexican-American War, which is the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. All this land that is dotted here is taken from Mexico. The war also happened because they wanted to buy this from Mexico. Mexico said, no, you can't have our land. So, and the real battle behind, yes, thank you, Amanda, all those states was Mexican land. In this treaty, what was promised? I'm setting us up for why Californians and Tejanos helped the Battle of Puebla and why it helps the Civil War, us win the Civil War, is in that treaty, the Mexicans were supposed to retain their right of their language, all that land right there. We're supposed to be speaking Spanish there. Their religion and their culture and their property. Land was stolen through legal fraud and intimidation. Mexicans were treated as foreigners in their own homeland, which still happens today. And citizenship rights were promised and then denied or delayed for decades. So if this happened in 1848, and the Battle of Puebla is happening in 1860, what, Anita?
62.
62. That's 48, 58, 59, 60,
I know.
14
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah.
How do you think the Mexicans living in California and Texas are feeling about how they're being treated right now? And who are they going to help? So if the French are going to help the South, who wants to keep slavery, the Confederates who want to keep slavery, and they're again like, your enemy is my enemy. They're going to help the Battle of Puebla and say they were sending them money to the Battle of Puebla, to the Mexicans to be able to beat the French. And had the French, and the French were planning on helping the Confederates. Because of the Battle of Puebla and because they lost, they're not focusing on the Civil War right now or helping the Confederates. They're focusing on themselves because they're in a battle with Mexico. So because they lost, they are now like recalibrating to go back and fight them again. Had they won, they would have gone straight to go help the Confederates because they were going to help pro-slavery. And instead, had to go, or we're still fighting Mexico instead of helping the Confederates. So, yes. The question about helping, did it help us win the Civil War? I say yes. It's not in our history books, I'm sure, but I would suggest that yes, because they lost the Battle of Puebla, it helped us eventually win the Civil War. I believe it was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Yes, Amanda. We continue to witness and be complicit in these very same colonial dynamics happening everywhere, including Palestine and including here in the US and the Congo and the Sudan. Yes. And we see us still being treated as foreigners. Let's just call it out, because the Supreme Court has legalized racial profiling based on the way we look, speak, work, are still being treated as, literally being treated as that every single one of us is a foreigner and an immigrant. Because the other thing I hear from our community is we don't celebrate because they don't even celebrate it in Mexico. So why would we celebrate? Because it's not our history. It's this little town in Puebla. It's their history. Nobody else in Mexico even celebrates it. But now, thank you, Anita, you've expanded our knowledge to say, no, this isn't just a Mexican holiday for Puebla. This is more of an American holiday because of our history, all this land, and our allyship and our alignment. And also just that you've mentioned its connection to the Chicano movement as well, that we've never
Yeah,
stopped celebrating.
no, you know what I've stopped. I'll just tell you. I'll wrap up my part to tell you that what I've learned for having to do the research to pull this together is that it's a resistance and activist holiday. That's what I. Their initial battle was a resistance battle against tyranny. The and then the resistance against the Second French intervention the the Civil War against the South. So it was resistance, and then it became activist in the 60s. They borrowed that. They emphasized May 5th as an activist, and it's near May 1st, which is a common activist labor day. It's a labor movement day. So it's that's what I'm taking away, that it's great to party. Nothing wrong with that. But it's also this incredibly rich history of deciding to fight injustice and to resist. So, okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anita. And she's shared some sources here. I added a couple more. CMAR has a great article. If you don't know, CMAR has a museum, a Hispanic Latino museum. They also have this great article. We'll share these documents with you about sharing Cinco de Mayo, the use and misuse and reclaiming the Chicano past. So they too are highlighting its connection to our Chicano history. And then I found this video that is also bust the myths around Cinco de Mayo, and it also talks about the Civil War connection. So for those of you interested in that Civil War connection, there's a YouTube video out there that we'll link here. Tanya, you put your camera on. I would love to see your face. Did you have a question or a comment? Okay. So the other question that came up when Adi did the presentation for Office of Insurance Commission was, what can I do to support the community? And Adi could not be with us today, but these are some of the things that she talked about, and I just thought that they were just great ideas. Activism. As Anita mentioned, May 1st is a day of activism. It is a labor movement day. There will be many people not working on May 1st, and there will be May 1st protests and activism happening. That's on Friday. That's tomorrow. So activism, proximity and mutuality. Spend time in our community, not just celebrating, but also honoring. By participating in celebrations that are Latine-led and Latine-centered. And I'll have a list of some of those, and we'll open it up for any of you who want to share any that you know about as well. Getting to know your neighbors and your friends. I am in EDI work, and one of the things that we say are, because that I have all of these neighbors, or I have lots of friends that are people of color. Are they really your friends? If you've never talked about their lived experiences, racism, those topics with your friends, then you're not as close as you might think that you are. Share what you learned today with your family and friends. Read books on Mexican American history and Chicano studies when we're talking specifically about Cinco de Mayo, but of course, books on all different cultures and languages. Even in our own Latino culture, we represent over 23 different countries. And while we may be connected with Spanish, there's many of our indigenous languages that have been erased. Getting to know, oh, I have it at the end. Getting to know, and I follow some indigenous creators to try to learn some of those languages. Teach your children, grow their world, teach them about what you learned today, and less commercialism and more belonging. And then learn another language. Would love to hear anybody else's suggestions on how to support the community. And also, if you have any events that you'd like to highlight or elevate today. Sam says, does anyone have book recommendations on Mexican American Chicano history? Well, Sam, we have a year-long list of books that are on our website and we can share the link to our website if somebody wants to put it in there. And I'm sure there's Chicano history books on that list. There are a variety of topics that we've been gathering, but I'm sure that there's Chicano history on there as well. And visit your local library. So some of the events happening this weekend, that's why I wanted to have it before Cinco de Mayo so that you could also support, are put on by communities. I did not post any that were had any connection with bars or alcohol. Sunnyside Cinco de Mayo, which is where I will be, was one of the largest, I'm not sure if it still is, but one of the largest celebrations in the state. And I think we're the only one that go 3 days. So I would say that we are the largest in the state. It starts tomorrow and goes through Sunday. There is a Cinco de Mayo celebration in Pasco on Sunday. Centro de la Raza on the west side has theirs on Saturday on the 2nd. And Olympia Lula Fest is having a Cinco de Mayo Noche de Mariachi. These other ones are free. That one I think is $10. Yeah, tickets are $10. But mariachi. Mount Vernon has theirs on Sunday, and they have a beautiful folklorico parade. And then Centro Cultural Mexicano out of Redmond does theirs on Sunday. Feel free to unmute and continue in the chat. Our last item on the agenda is there is a band, show how old you are by saying if you know who they are. I'm sure we all know who they are. Called War. And wanted to highlight their connection to Chicano culture. So War has a barrio connection. They were based out of East LA, Long Beach. They connected with Chicano youth through a shared experience of California, Compton, and Watts. They were a multi-ethnic group, including Chicanos and Indigenous and Black members. Most known, you may recognize the anthem, the Lowrider Anthem. It was a 1975 hit, was specifically inspired by Chicano lowrider car culture, and has since become an iconic anthem for that community. And diverse lineup formed in 1969. The band included members like Howard Scott, Harold Brown, Charles Miller, Morris Dickerson, Lonnie Jordan, Lee Oscar, and Papa D. Allen. And cultural fusion, their sound was a blend of funk, soul, Latin, and rock, and often described as pan-cultural jam. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Kathy. And thank you, Cindy, our ASL interpreters and captioners. Gracias. Thank you for joining us today. We did record today, so we'll be sending out the recording and posting it to our YouTube channel.